MSW Media.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Welcome to episode 185 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok. We have a lot to cover today, including a new investigation into a super PAC set up by Elon Musk, a deal reached between Rudy Giuliani and Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, and a new cooperator in the Arizona prosecution of the fraudulent electors.
New cooperator, a flipper.
Who could it be? Who could it be?
I don't know, but
a friend of yours, maybe?
I wonder if there'll be tears. And we have yet another attempt from Trump to recuse another judge, this time Judge Merchan. This is for the third time in his 34 felony count election interference case in Manhattan. We have Trump's reply to DA Alvin Bragg on immunity. We went over DA Alvin Bragg's filing on immunity last week, and Trump losing his gag order appeal in that same case. There's also some updates on the E. Jean Carroll appeal of the very first one, the $5 million one, not the $85 million one. And the Tina Peters trial is underway. She's the Mesa County clerk that helped steal voter data. We'll chat about that. And just tons to go over. But first, we want to thank our new patrons for signing up to get these shows ad-free and early. Hopefully, we'll see some of our new patrons at the gala that we're doing in D.C. on August 17th. We have a few tickets, low ticket alert, to the live show in DC on August 16th. So grab your tickets if you've been thinking about it. You don't want to miss out. But we want to thank our new patrons, Roy Monfort, Mark Douglas, Mary Stiller, Gloria from Missouri. I am a blue dot in a sea of red, she says. Stephanie Little, Angela Eakin, Francois Tversky, Hillary McFarlane, and Patricia Shelton. We couldn't do this show without you. So thank you. Thank you so much. And, we're going to start doing and keep doing these events, these live meetups for patrons as a thank you. Dinner and drinks are on us. It's going to be me, Dana, Pete Strzok, Andy McCabe, Harry Dunn will be there August 17th. It's going to be fun. So thank you. Thank you so much for supporting independent media. I'm going to get to head to the DNC because of you. So I'm very excited about that. So let's talk about the DNC because just this morning, we're recording this Tuesday. We usually record this Monday, but we waited because we got our vice presidential pick, and it is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a great pick. I mean, look, we talked about it a little bit during the bonus in last episode. I mean, I like Pete Buttigieg a tremendous amount, but I think in terms of a ticket, and part of this is me being a homer, having lived and gone to high school in Minnesota. He is the kind of like down to earth, easy to talk to, no nonsense. He's
the dad. He's America's dad.
Right. And at the same time, he was a career enlisted, will be by far and away the most senior non-commissioned officer that we've ever had as either a VP or presidential pick. Spent a career in the Minnesota Army National Guard as a fellow artilleryman. Yet another reason I'm fond of him, even though it caused him some significant hearing loss. But I just think as a sort of dad who is a football coach, who is into hunting, who is also for gun control, who also, like way back, I think in the 90s, was forging an alliance with, in the middle of Minnesota with, transgender folks. His ability to reach across all these different constituencies and build consensus in a way that I think if he goes out and stumps in rural Michigan, in rural Wisconsin, in rural Pennsylvania, He's absolutely the kind of person that will resonate with folks. I mean, he's you roll into a truck stop and he's sitting there, telling a joke and everybody's laughing, and at the same time, just tremendously accomplished. So I like it. I'm happy. I think it's great. And just let's roll.
Yeah, he's a fantastic pick. He checks off the do no harm box, but beyond that, he's a real unifier, like you said. Just today, right after the announcement, we've got AOC and Joe Manchin agreeing on something, which is the pick of Tim Walz. And so I think that just shows how big a reach he has, how many people fit under his tent, and I think it's going to be a blowout, hopefully. I don't know. We'll see.
Hey. But let's run until you hit the tape, right?
Right. No, yeah, ignore the polls and make sure a lot of red states are purging voter rolls right now. So, and not illegally either. But like if you haven't voted in a couple of elections, they have new rules and new laws set up by the Republican state legislatures that say if you haven't voted in the last election, we're purging you from the voter registration rolls. Or if you haven't voted in the last 2 elections or whatever, go to vote.org and just take 2 minutes right now. Pause this show. Check your voter registration status to make sure that you're still registered to vote. A lot of people are finding that they are no longer registered to vote, especially in places like Alabama, Ohio, North Carolina. The election boards there are doing a number. But anyway, just vote.org. Make sure that you are registered so that when you show up to vote, you are on the rolls and you can get a ballot. And if you show up and you're not, ask for a provisional ballot. Always ask for a provisional ballot. They have to give you one. All right. Let's see. Well, let's talk really briefly about this $10 million Egypt thing, this Team 10 in the Mueller investigation. A lot of people are, talking about it. We did a huge story on it back in 2020 when this news broke from Caitlin Polance over at CNN 4 years ago, October, I think 25th. The Daily Beans episode is called The Secret Company from Country A. We were all trying to figure out who it was. I thought it was the Qatar Investment Authority. It wasn't. It was Egypt. And there was a $10 million in cash taken out. Pete, you're going to talk about that in a second. Put into plastic bags. And then all of a sudden, magically, after resisting writing a $10 million check for the campaign, Trump was all of a sudden cool with it and wrote that $10 million check. So Bannon was in on this, Roger Stone. So it's totally above board and very cool. Mm-hmm. But there were it's kind of an old story, but there's a new aspects to it that Carol Leonnig at the Washington Post was able to report on. And one of the biggest aspects that jumped out at me was that good old Mike Sherwin, the guy who blocked the raid at Mar-a-Lago and made it a subpoena, the guy who blocked search warrants for Eastman's phone and Clark's phone, and they had to use the inspector general and the post office cops, the guy who went on 60 Minutes and talked about seditious conspiracy charges against the Oath Keepers, almost wrecked that case, and Judge Mehta had to have an emergency conference with everybody involved and told him to shut his mouth. The guy who resigned before he was sanctioned by the Department of Justice for violating those rules. This guy, this Trump holdover, the guy who approved and continued with the letting Flynn off the hook and shortening Roger Stone's sentence, installed, handpicked by Barr and Trump to go in there at the DC U.S. Attorney's Office. That fucking guy, excuse my language, I know it's not the bonus, but Mike Sherwin, he is the one who refused to brief Merrick Garland on the investigation into Donald Trump that J.P. Cooney had already started before Garland got there. And he is the one who refused to brief Merrick Garland and the new DC U.S. attorney appointed by Biden on this $10 million investigation. And so Jessie Liu was there for a while, but, they got rid of her. She wanted to, go through and perhaps subpoena. There was enough there to subpoena Trump's bank records. But anyway, it was a big old mess. If you Google search Daily Beans, Secret Company from Country A, you can hear the entire story. But Pete, talk a little bit about what's new from this incredible reporting from Carol Leonnig at the Post, because there are some details that we are just now learning.
Yeah, and so I'll start on this with a caveat that like the Glomar caveat, right? Like I'm not confirming or denying that any of the stuff that we're talking about is accurate or not. It is purely as the media has reported it. So with that caveat in place, there are a couple of things. One is, there's a factual development, which is stunning and new. And then there is what you went through, just the absolute, in my opinion, reckless dereliction of duty by any number of individuals in the Department of Justice and the FBI to follow up on, and as you're about to hear, the most extraordinarily confirming fact based on some initial allegations. And so again, as you go back and pull up that Daily Beans episode, but according to media reporting, and CNN did a lot, and also the New York Times did some, according to their reporting, way back in the late 2016 timeframe during the general election, Egypt allegedly was looking to make a payment of $10 million to Trump in the Trump campaign. And if you remember at the time, although this self-professed billionaire was actually not and is not a billionaire, was extraordinarily cash-strapped, his finances were in trouble going into the final days of the election. He was not doing ad buys. And suddenly there was an infusion of his own money of $10 million, which was later paid back. Well, according to CNN and the New York Times, there was reporting that came into the U.S. intelligence community that Egypt was trying and did pay Trump $10 million. And there was some question about if that happened, who did it. And then the process of the investigation, which you pointed out, again, according to the media reports, included ultimately one of the things was trying to seek subpoenas of Egyptian banking entities and those folks around it to figure out and try and find if this $10 million were anywhere to be found. Now, that was, and should have been and was an extraordinarily big deal at the time and remains. But what's new and what, the huge thing, and this is both Carol Linnigan or her colleague Aaron Davis, who I think are writing a book about the Justice Department, but the new kind of bombshell that's gotten kind of overlooked with the nomination of the vice president or the naming of the vice president and so much other stuff, that 5 days before Trump became president, January 17, a manager at a bank branch in Cairo, this is directly from the article, received an unusual letter from an organization linked to the Egyptian intelligence service asking the bank to, quote unquote, kindly withdraw nearly $10 million in US dollars from the organization's account, all in cash. Inside the state-run National Bank of Egypt, employees were soon busy placing bundles of $100 bills into 2 large bags. According to records from the bank, 4 men arrived and carried away the bags, which U.S. officials later described in sealed court filings as weighing a combined 200 pounds and containing what was then a sizable share of Egypt's reserve of U.S. currency. Federal investigators,
almost all of the U.S. cash they had on hand.
Right. And so, again, if you're like strategic reserves and you want to hold dollars because of its stability on the global currency market, all gone and out the window. So what's interesting, again, if this reporting is accurate, there was initially an allegation from an intelligence source that the Egyptians wanted to pay Trump $10 million, proof that Trump loaned himself $10 million and then paid it back. And now you have, as a result, it appears, according to media reporting, of a back and forth to get, subpoenaing bank records from Egypt and elsewhere, actually a money trail now that a group, not just anything, but a front company, a group linked to Egyptian intelligence, had withdrawn 200 pounds of $100 bills totaling up $10 million, which was exactly, according to media reporting, the amount that Egypt wanted to pay Trump. And so you plug that into the fact of that initial reporting, the fact that after Trump won the election, his very first call to a foreign leader, very first one, wasn't Tony Blair or Theresa May, whoever was in the UK, wasn't to Canada, wasn't to Australia, wasn't to France. It was to Sisi in Egypt. Mm-hmm. Very first call to a foreign leader.
Mm-hmm. So, and it was when he was being pressured to write that $10 million check by his campaign. That is when he met with Sisi at the G7. And then after that, this whole money transfer went down. And then he called him to thank him after he won.
And so this holy cow, like if I am an investigator and I have all these allegations and all these facts falling and corroborating one another, this is an extraordinarily strong trail. I've rarely seen something this strong where you get sort of intel reporting with like a tangible, because it's not like, oh, they paid him $1,200. I mean, $10 million is a lot of money, and it's a very specific amount of money. And then you have that exact amount of money in cash being withdrawn at this time. I mean, come on. So you're like, okay, great. What happened? As you mentioned in the beginning, nothing happened. Mike Sherwin shut it down. Bill Barr, by the way, when all this came up, was busy over in Italy with John Durham hearing about some maybe it's the same thing. Who knows? None of us know is the point. Some other criminal allegation or a criminal allegation from the Italians about Donald Trump managed to deep six all of this. ensuring that, no, we need to make, these FBI agents are out to get Trump. It's like, no, actually, these FBI agents are looking at all this goddamn horrific criminal and counterintelligence information that is coming in day after day after day after day and saying we have to do something, not the other way around. But Bill Barr, with all these, folks you name who didn't want to pursue, whoever under him, essentially let it go away. And then remarkably, not Jesse Liu, not Mike Sherman, when like Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco sit down with Chris Wray and then Dave Bowditch or, maybe Paul Abate, whoever, the timing, although I think it was probably, right around the time they transitioned and said, okay, let's go through what are your big cases? What are your big terrorism cases? What are your big, public corruption cases? What are your big counterintelligence cases? Not one of them said, oh yeah, by the way, we've got information initially, according to press reporting, that the Egyptians wanted to pay $10 million to Trump. And by the way, we got subpoena returns showing a withdrawal of $10 million from a front linked to Egyptian intelligence, which was the entity that was talking about giving the money to Trump. Nobody bothered to mention that. Nobody thought maybe the incoming Attorney General of the United States of America might want to know that. Nobody thought maybe the Deputy Attorney General of the United States of America might want to know that about the president who had just led an insurrection. Because God forbid we do anything to make Trump angry, even though he's no longer the president, right? Even though he had just led an insurrection, we don't want to appear political, so just don't talk about it. And what happens? Bribery? Yeah. 5-year statute of limitations? We're well past that. The other thing that's really interesting, as you mentioned, the subpoena fight that presumably involved this, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And so the facts behind the subpoena are well known to John Roberts and the other members of the Supreme Court when they drafted the Trump immunity decision that talked a great deal about bribery and what would or wouldn't be admissible in terms of evidence. They knew about this as they were drafting that opinion, granting extraordinarily broad immunity to Trump. So the whole thing stinks. It is this new fact point, if accurate, as reported, is extraordinarily damning. And it just goes to show all of the things that Bill Barr and everybody else was throwing around about what the deep state was up to. The deep state was not up to that. Bill Barr was thinking about that because that's what he was doing. And he therefore turned around and accused everybody else. But it's just maddening.
No, it reminds me of the suppression of trying to. You remember the Hulk Bank indictments that they were trying to thwart as well?
Yes,
in
indeed.
Turkey. So yeah, this is one of who knows innumerable, countless cases, some that we probably don't even know about, that were quashed by Bill Barr and his lackeys. So anyway, interesting new reporting there. Go back and listen to that Daily Beans episode. Again, it's called The Secret Company from Country A. And they shut down courthouses. It was very secretive. It was very kept under wraps. This is probably one of the things that was almost led to Donald Trump firing Robert Mueller as special counsel. He ended up handing it off to the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, along with most financial investigations into Donald Trump. It was the 11th of 14 under those redaction bars in Appendix, was it Appendix D of the Mueller report? But anyway, thank you for talking about that. I know that we can only really go by what's in the public reporting, so I appreciate you responding. But we do have more news today. That's just our introduction of the show today. So you're going to get a little bit of an extra long show tonight. But let's talk about the fact that Elon Musk could be in legal trouble. And this time it's not with the SEC. It's with Secretary of State in Michigan. A political action committee backed by billionaire Elon Musk is being investigated by the Michigan Secretary of State's office amid efforts to collect voter data. Musk, as we know, CEO of Tesla and SpaceX and Twitter, has said he created and helped fund the America PAC, which is supporting former President Trump. Musk has a net worth, as we know, of over $225 billion. The committee has been acquiring detailed voter information from those who live in Michigan and other battleground states after people submit their personal data through a section on the PAC's website that says, click here to register to vote. And after clicking on the register to vote button on the website, users in states like Michigan can submit a zip code, address, and phone number. And people with a Michigan address are brought to a page that says, thank you. And it asks you to complete the form below to help wrap up the voter registration process. And as of Sunday afternoon, there's no other form to complete below the words thank you. So it doesn't actually register you to vote. And it seems like a pretty open and shut fraud case to me. They are lying to you to get your personal voter data. And so we're going to keep an eye on whether the Secretary of State, they'll look into this. If they find that any Michigan laws were broken, then they will refer it to the Attorney General of Michigan for a criminal investigation. So that's what's happening with Elon Musk.
Yeah, and then over in Arizona, Attorney General Chris Mays plans to announce next week that one of the 18 defendants in her investigation of the so-called fake elector scheme will become a cooperating witness for the prosecution. We're going to have a very significant announcement to make early next week, Mays said during Friday's taping of this weekend's Sunday Square Off. When asked whether one of the defendants would flip, Mays responded, "I think that's accurate." Now, at the time, Mays declined to provide more information. "We're making more progress in the case, and we feel good about the case," she said. She also stuck to her previous forecast that the first trial in the case would come next year. Quote, "It's good news for the government, bad news for the defendants, and a pathway for other defendants in that case as well," said Mark Kukanovich, a white-collar defense attorney at Ballard Spahr in Phoenix and a former federal prosecutor. He continued, "The evidence is overwhelmingly strong. The first people through the door usually get the best deals."
And this just in, we know who the flipper is. It is none other than Jenna Ellis, former Trump attorney, one of the 18 defendants in the Arizona fake electors case stemming from the 2020 election. She's fully cooperating. And Pete, she got what's called a sweetheart deal. She was charged with 9 felonies, and now she has no charges. So her proffer and her cooperation are really significant. They have to be really significant to this case. And I think Rudy is probably, he doesn't have any other problems right now. So this is probably a big one. I'm just kidding. He's got so many problems. But I can't imagine. Would you think he'll call another press conference at Four Seasons Total Landscaping?
Yeah, down in the Southwest this time instead of outside of Philly, maybe. But for Ellis, it makes sense. If you're going to cooperate in one jurisdiction, you might as well, in for a dime, in for a dollar sort of thing. You might as well keep cooperating. Now, I don't know how much she has, on him, if it's substantively different than, say, what she's providing in Georgia. But she's clearly decided, that she's going to consistently sit there and, provide whatever information she has. And it is, clearly, there's a heavy, heavy hammer if she doesn't cooperate. I mean, this is the kind of thing like, Chesbro and his, Badger something, this secret sock puppet Twitter account that he didn't talk about when he was busy, running around cooperating with everybody. And then, it turns out I forgot to mention the what was it? What Badger? Something Badger. Right? Pundit Badger. Yes. Forgot to mention this other Twitter account that I had. And by the way, all those, yes, the CCTV coverage that was released around the Capitol that may show me, rolling in with a bunch of fraudulent documents to hand off to, wherever, the chief of staff or whoever it was on Ron Johnson's staff pawned them off or pushed them off. Now, this is,
I think, fascinating because we have the immunity ruling, right, from the Supreme Court. Now we have Jenna Ellis has flipped in Arizona. Trump has not yet been indicted in Arizona. So now I am on, honestly, Trump indictment watch in Arizona because now that she knows that only private acts and not official acts, she can craft, I think, an indictment now that she kind of understands, because Chris Mays, I'm talking about, understands what the immunity rules are. We could see that. So we'll keep you posted. All right, we have a lot more news to get to, but we have to take a quick break. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank, including Mally Bugma, Heather Gould, Stephanie Miller, VIX Carpe, or Carp, Muller the Eagle, Chrissy Lala, Rowan Willis, Amy Azell, and Sandy Rudder. Thank all of you so much for your support of the show. Thank you for giving us the being part of the team and letting us bring this to you every week. And of course, for getting the bonus episode, which we can delve into with more swearing and various extra events. So with that,
yeah, we swore a little bit in the A block, but it
a
really
little bit, but
bonus.
it's
quite spectacular.
Merited. Yes. Let's go to Manhattan, where we have several updates in DA Alvin Bragg's case that resulted in 34 felony convictions for Donald Trump. First up, the DA's office has responded to Donald's latest attempt to recuse Judge Merchan. This is different from his attempt to recuse Judge Engoron that we covered last week in the New York Attorney General's civil fraud case.
Is that the one where the guy ran up to him when he was walking to his car?
He accosted me. Yes, yeah. I don't know him. He yelled at me. He told me to take it easy on Trump. And so therefore you should recuse. Yeah, no. So this is different judge still bandying about you should recuse. Now this is in a letter to Judge Merchan. This is from Matthew Colangelo at the DA's office writing in response. This letter responds to defendant's July 31, 2024 motion to renew his 2 prior motions for recusal. The people do not oppose defendant's request for leave to file and ask that this letter be considered our opposition to his motion. Defendant's motion to renew is a vexatious and frivolous attempt to relitigate an issue that was twice addressed by this court in orders that the First Department then refused to disturb. Now remember, this is an aside. The First Department is the next appellate level up from, the judge. Defendant identifies no new facts or changes in the law that warrant a different outcome. He appears to base his motion on the fact that Vice President Harris is now a candidate for president rather than vice president. But defendant's earlier motions already argued that the vice president was his political opponent and that the court's family member will therefore reportedly benefit somehow from rulings in this case. Indeed, defendant rests his latest motion on the same affirmation he presented in support of his April 3 motion. This regurgitated showing does not come close to meeting the standard to renew. The court already held that the speculative series of claims in defendant's April 3 motion and affirmation do not remotely establish that the court has a direct personal, substantial, or pecuniary interest in reaching a particular conclusion. The department dismissed defendant's Article 78 challenge to those orders, holding that he had not established a clear right to recuse or that this court acted in excess of its jurisdiction by denying his motion. No amount of overheated hyperbolic rhetoric can cure the fatal defect. The motion for recusal should be denied for a third time.
So, all right. So remember, Judge Juan Merchan's daughter works for an organization that has some clients that are Democrats, and that was why Trump was trying to get Judge Merchan to recuse, and it was because Biden and Harris were running. And now he wants to renew everything and start all over because now Harris is at the top of the ticket instead of Biden. And they're like, you're weird. You're a weirdo. No. So I don't think Judge Merchan is going to go for this. I think, didn't he just issue an order today, actually, where he's giving himself 10 more days to make a decision on the immunity stuff, not the recusal stuff. And he said the September 18th sentencing schedule date stands. It's still in effect.
Yep.
So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because Donald Trump responded to Alvin Bragg's opposition to his immunity claims over evidence in the 34 felony count conviction. You'll recall that the DA said Trump failed to raise these objections to the evidence, like his tweets and his discussions with Hope Hicks. He failed to raise them earlier. He abandoned his appeal. And even if not, the acts are private and not immune. And even if not, the evidence is harmless anyway. So Trump's response is this. He says, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled conclusively and unequivocally that President Trump is protected by immunity for his official acts. In this case, a politically motivated district attorney violated that immunity by using official acts evidence in grand jury proceedings and at trial. Therefore, the case must be dismissed and the jury's verdicts must be vacated. The DA concedes that Trump was an intervening decision. That's the Supreme Court ruling on immunity that resulted in a newly announced rule. And because of that, and because President Trump raised presidential immunity objections with this court and the First Department, the DA's preservation arguments are meritless. He didn't raise them on these specific pieces of evidence, though. He's just saying all of it, anything. I shouldn't have had to have said anything about specific stuff. I mentioned the word immunity, and so therefore everything is preserved. That's kind of what his argument is. A DA fought President Trump's pretrial motions and urged the court to rush ahead to trial. That was wrong. The Trump court made clear that pretrial review of these issues was necessary. Yeah, but time is linear, sir. Okay. President Trump is entitled to absolute immunity and disputes that rebuttable presumptive presidential immunity can never be sufficient to protect the interest at stake, which is an issue the Supreme Court expressly left open. But in light of the DA's strenuous resistance to the reasonable pretrial request to wait for the Trump decision, they are not entitled to post-trial rebuttal opportunity. The bell cannot be unrung. That's my argument to Donald as well. The DA's presidential immunity violations were not merely trial errors, and the violations were certainly not harmless. And they put harmless in quotes. But of course, they don't explain how it's not harmless at all. They just say it wasn't. In any event, harmless error review is an inadequate safeguard for these structural constitutional violations, which adversely impacted the mode of the proceedings mandated by the Trump court and the constitutional structure. So he's very upset and he's very angry. And he says that we need to have a time machine. And he's saying they're not harmless, and that, but giving no reasons as to why. So that's basically his weak sauce argument, Pete.
Yeah, and it truly is. And then, one last update on this case. A New York State appeals court on Thursday rejected Donald Trump's challenge to a gag order in his hush money criminal case. So many cases to keep track of. Trump challenged the gag order in the hush money criminal case where the former U.S. president was convicted in May on charges stemming from hush money paid to a porn star. The decision by the appellate division in Manhattan means the Republican presidential nominee cannot comment publicly about individual prosecutors and others in the case until Justice Juan Merchan sentences him on September 18th, just 7 weeks before the November 5th election. Trump argued that the quote-unquote unjust and unconstitutional gag order restricts Trump's ability to respond to Harris, saying she framed her candidacy as that of, quote, prosecutor versus convicted felon, unquote. Show me the lie. Harris served as California's attorney general earlier in her career. And the Supreme Court has rejected Missouri's long-shot original jurisdiction bid to block the gag order, of course, with Alito and Thomas saying they would have allowed the case to be filed.
Of course they would have. Which is just ridiculous. And, if you listen to the Daily Beans, we went over all the new travel paid for by Harlan Crow on private jets to Hawaii and New Zealand from Justice Thomas that he also failed to put on his financial disclosure forms after being told 4 times and amending them 3 times.
Can I just add on that? And I'm sure you went through all of it. That when one of the original ProPublica articles came out about Thomas and all these Crow travel junkets, one of the things they talked about, and he was wearing, was a polo shirt. And they mentioned that, for many of these cruises, they would actually create like embroidered polo shirts, like a Aegean Island cruise or something. But Clarence Thomas, I think, had on a shirt with that trip in Greece, which was one of the things that they're pointing out now he didn't disclose. So how either arrogant or dumb do you have to be when there's all this information suddenly out in the public domain that presumably you or your clerk or your admin assistant or your attorney or somebody ought to be like, oh, hey, Clarence, look, they got the polo shirt with the Greek cruise. You ought to maybe put that down. But nope, didn't do it.
That's like the January 6th guys with their Civil War January 6th, 2021 shirts. Thanks. Thanks for the hint. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say there you didn't prepare for this? Okay. But you have shirts. Wonderful. All right. We have a lot more news to get to, but we're going to take another quick break. So stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank, including Nana213 or 213, if that's an area code, Ashish Patel, Michael Blank, C, The Glitter Shitter, Jay McCosker, Brooke Berg, and Kate. Thank you so much. Again, we couldn't do this without you. Your support means everything to us. So we really appreciate it. If you want to sign up to be a patron, you can do it by going to patreon.com/aisle45pod. That's AISLE45POD. All right, Pete, let's head to D.C. with the latest from Caitlin Polance. Jeffrey Clark, the Trump-era Justice Department official who advocated for the department to contact Georgia and cast doubt on Donald Trump's election loss, should face a 2-year suspension from practicing law, and that's according to a disciplinary committee in D.C. on Thursday. As an environmental lawyer at the Justice Department, Clark tried to push through an official letter to people in Georgia after the election, urging the state to interfere with the election results. His superiors at the Justice Department told him no. The disciplinary committee found Clark included false and misleading information in that letter, and said, quote, what Mr. Clark did was objectively reckless, but subjectively, the evidence indicated that he thought he had been chosen for an historic cause to which he applied all of his energies, unquote. That's a 3-person hearing committee in the findings. I personally think it's bullshit, a 2-year law license suspension. He should be permanently disbarred, just like Rudy Giuliani was in New York and likely will be in D.C. I think a 2-year suspension isn't
so Jeff
enough.
Clark, this is the Jeff Clark when Eric Hirschman or whoever it was that said, hey, we might have rioting in the streets. The same Jeff Clark who said, that's why we have the Insurrection Act. That Jeff Clark, right?
That's
but
him.
Yes, I guess he was just applying all of his energies to a coup and fucking talking about, and now both of us are swearing on the regular pod. We're going to get the little E box on Apple Podcasts.
You're not wearing your swearing jacket.
I'm not wearing my swearing jacket, but please, come on. Applying his energies, this was not zealous advocacy. This was pursuit of a insurrection. This was pursuit of a autogolp, if you fancy coup, but you are already in power and you're just trying to keep it. But he is in no way deserving of anything, in my opinion, short of a absolute lifetime disbarment, because there is, yes, if trying to tear down our democracy and replace it with an autocracy is excusable because he was simply, he thought he was chosen for a historic cause. If he didn't have the good sense to understand that he was pursuing enabling an authoritarian and destroying our governmental order, I don't care if he was just applying all of his energies. He was, it's ridiculous. I agree with you. He should be permanently disbarred. This is BS. I don't know. Again, if you're not disbarred for more than 2 years for doing that, come on, DC bar, what are you doing?
Yeah. Now, here's some interesting, cool news. Judge Luttig, from, former Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals judge, said the American Bar Association House of Delegates has passed a policy adopting the Statement of Principles to Preserve, Protect, and Defend the Constitution, the Rule of Law, and American Democracy. And that was written by the Society for the Rule of Law, which Judge Luttig is a co-founder. So that's good, but, too late for Jeff Clark. He should have been permanently disbarred, in my opinion.
Completely. And talking about people who should have gotten it far worse than they've gotten it so far, Rudy Giuliani has agreed to a last-minute deal to end his personal bankruptcy case and pay about $400,000 to a financial advisor hired by his creditors, avoiding a potential deep dive into the former New York City mayor's finances that was threatened by a federal judge.
Boy, he's willing to do anything to keep his personal stuff
I guarantee you he's got whether it's with his son, wherever it is, he's got money parked in a place where I'm glad that they Shamos and Ruby Freeman will get this, but it just anyway. In the agreement, which is filed on Wednesday, Giuliani will give his lawyers $100,000 to help pay the creditor's financial advisor, New York-based Global Data Risk, and pay the rest of the firm's expenses from the proceeds of selling either his New York City apartment or Florida condominium, which are worth an estimated $5.6 million and $3.5 million, respectively, according to court documents. Global Data Risk is also allowed to put liens on the New York City and Florida properties to make sure Giuliani pays all its fees under the agreement. Freeman and Moss, meanwhile, are now free to seek enforcement and payment of the $148 million verdict in federal court in Washington, D.C., where they won their case. The bankruptcy had put a hold on collection efforts. So I'm hopeful, again, this... it is a multi-tiered and sort of like step process. This gets the whole bankruptcy shenanigans that he was trying to hide assets, in my opinion, settled. I do hope that they are able to find additional assets that they can seize to satisfy. Again, I don't think they'll come anywhere near the $148 million that they were awarded. I don't think they'll come anywhere near what they deserve, which is probably, frankly, far more than $148 million. But I just hope there is something that every time I see Rudy Giuliani riding around in a black SUV or flying in a private jet, the man should not be living the standard of life that he is living, given what he owes to people.
Well, maybe Harlan Crow can lend him some cheddar. I don't know.
Yeah, he can hang out. He can hang out in Clarence's RV out in the back.
Maybe they make him a polo shirt.
Wait, can we take their RV? No, Rudy's in there. It smells like cigars and flop sweat and hair dye.
Make him like a embroidered polo shirt that says 2024 bankruptcy. One last story here in this segment from Adam Klasfeld. Oral arguments in Trump's appeal of E. Jean Carroll's verdict have been set for September 6th. Oral arguments September 6th. That's 11, 12 days before he's sentenced in Manhattan. So, by the way, this is for the original $5 million case. But you have to remember the verdict in that case resolved the merits for the $83 million case. So it kind of would have a domino effect if he somehow won this appeal, but I doubt that he will. Oral arguments anyway, set for September 6th. And, you want to follow Adam Klasfeld for updates on that story and mark your calendars.
Yeah,
September's a bad month for Trump.
So is August. I mean, we're going to roll through the DNC. We're going to have, all the excitement around that. We're going to roll into these oral arguments, and then we're going to roll into his sentencing. And it just, at some point, Judge Chutkin, and I'm sure you're covering this with Andy and with the Jack podcast, she's going to start having hearings, I'm convinced. And so this, there's a lot of
she's got
nonstop,
one set for August 16th. Yeah,
she's a lot of nonstop excitement for the criminal travails of Donald Trump. Even if he's not going to get to trial anywhere other than New York, still a lot of fun information coming.
Yeah, fun for us, right? Okay, we have one more a segment with a bunch of news in it that we have to get to. But we have to take one last quick break, so stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. One more batch of new patrons to thank, including Matthew Pimental, Lori, Christopher Wilson, Just Here for the Show, Jeremy Millar, John Pentecost, Terry Pillow, and Kathy Doherty. Thank all of you so much for your support, for being part of the team, for making all this possible. And because of your support, we can do things like take you, in our last story of the day, down to Colorado in the trial of former Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters. And we wanted to give you an update from the Colorado Sun. Prosecutors walked jurors through the complicated system behind vote counting in the first week of former Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters' trial. They questioned witnesses who showed step by step how Peters allegedly invaded that system in her attempt to prove the 2020 election was fraudulent. Even though election conspiracy theories are not allowed in the trial and Peters is not charged with election fraud, the testimony has tiptoed around some of the numerous tentacles of national stolen election theories. The testimony so far has shown that election deniers descended on Mesa County when they found a clerk willing to accept their election fraud theories. Among the prominent right-wing figures cited by prosecution witnesses was Ron Watkins, the former administrator of the website that hosts the QAnon conspiracy. Famous election deniers MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell and math teacher Douglas Frank also figured into testimony, along with former professional surfer turned self-described cyber expert Conan Hayes,
of course,
and right-wing activist Sharana Bishop. Peters is being tried on 7 felonies and 3 misdemeanors alleging identity theft, criminal impersonation, official misconduct, and violating her duties as county clerk. Her trial is expected to run through next week and possibly into the following week. In cross-examination of prosecution witnesses, Peters' team of 4 defense attorneys and a phalanx of their clerks and consultants attempted to show that Peters broke no laws when she breached her own system. They drew testimony that the breach was her way of trying to ensure the election in her county was accurate.
Oh, man. All right. So this is fascinating. We talked a lot about these indictments when they came down for Tina Peters, but Colorado Sun goes on to say the prosecution opened its case with a detailed account of Peters' actions delivered by James Cannon, the chief investigator for the 21st Judicial District. And Cannon laid out these steps he took in the investigation that he began on August 9th of 2021, when his office received a call from the Office of Colorado Secretary of State notifying him the election system for Mesa County had been hacked and images of operating systems and passwords had been posted on a QAnon website. Within 2 days, Cannon had obtained search warrants for homes and offices linked to Peters and her election officials. He had yellow crime tape draping secure sections of the elections office. He had locks changed on secure rooms. He had checked all county records to determine who might have illegally entered the tabulation room during what is called a trusted build. Now, that has been described in the trial as a system upgrade that is similar to a periodic cell phone update, but with tight controls over who can be in attendance. Now, in this case, it was supposed to be a handful of representatives from the clerk's office, the Secretary of State's office, and Dominion Voting Systems, the maker of the voting system in use in Mesa County and most other counties in Colorado.
Yeah. So. Now, one of those listed on the slate of trusted build attendees was Gerald Wood, who was identified as an administrative assistant for Peters. Now, Wood, a local man who has been mentioned at the heart of the Peters case since it first blew up into a national story 3 years ago, told the jury he was ensnared in the election office crimes when he was asked by Peters and Bishop to take a consulting job with the clerk's office. Wood, a 32-year-old software engineer from an alarm monitoring company, came into Peters' orbit when he joined a conservative Mesa County group called Stand for the Constitution. Wood said it was initially organized for educating citizens about the Constitution, but, shockingly, evolved into a political conspiracy promoting group that included Peters. Wood agreed to do consulting work for Peters and, after passing a background check, was issued a badge to enter secure election areas. Peters' assistant clerk asked Wood to return the badge before he ever did any work. It was never returned to him. Wood, who was questioning election integrity at the time, did attend Lindell's Cyber Symposium in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, as a cyber expert participant. Peters was also at that symposium where confidential election information from Mesa County was publicized. It purportedly showed that Dominion election systems could change election results. Wood said the symposium was touted as an event where proof of election fraud would be revealed. He said it was not.
Yeah. Do you remember the guy on screen going through the voter data who then got a phone call, presumably from his lawyer, and was like, I got to go. And then the screen went dark.
I'm stopping talking now. Goodbye. Thank you.
Yeah. And this is also, by the way, when Mike Lindell put out his $5 million challenge to prove him wrong, and one of his own pals did. And he
took him to court and sued him, right?
He wouldn't pay him. So he sued him, and he just won the appeal on that. So.
Will you take payment in pillows? I should give you 2,500,000 pillows. No, I shall throw in 500,000 slippers.
In unmarked pillows, right. So while he was at the symposium, Wood got the news that his home had been searched by law enforcement officers and that his name was being publicized nationally as a participant in the election systems hacking in Mesa County. Maybe that was the guy who was like, I got to go. Maybe that was the phone call. Using Wood's access badge and identification, Hayes had allegedly entered the area that was off limits during the time when security cameras in the tabulation room were turned off. Employees testified that it was the first time in memory that those cameras had ever been turned off. And the plot came together after Peters became enmeshed with election deniers intent on showing that former President Trump had not lost the election. And that's according to witness Brandy Bance. Bance, Mesa County's director of elections, described being called into Peters' office for a meeting where Frank and Peters were present, along with two other Peters employees who have since taken plea deals and been sentenced for their parts in the elections systems breach. Now, Bance says she was asked by Peters to leave that meeting and was ordered to attend a stolen election seminar being given by Frank that evening at Grand Junction Hotel. She said she was uncomfortable with it. Quote, theories were being discussed, theories about voter fraud. That's what Bence told the jury. I don't support those theories.
Now, Frank was promoting the idea across the country that voting tabulation systems allowed for phantom voters to sway election outcomes. He said he was doing it at the behest and on the payroll of Lindell. Quote, I think it's a feather in your cap if we discover this corruption in your county. Frank was recorded telling Peters and her subordinates during a meeting in Peters' office on April 23, 2021. Part of that meeting was also recorded by Peters' election manager, Stephanie Winholes, who also testified that she was uncomfortable with the election conspiracy information seeping into the Mesa County office. Now, she called investigator Cannon sobbing when she felt she needed to report what was going on. During the meeting that upset her, Frank offered to bring in a team to find phantom voters on Mesa County's system. Quote, "They will do it for you. They are the best in the country," he said on the recording played during the trial. Peter's defense team spent much of Friday afternoon trying to poke holes in the testimony of Wood, who told jurors he did not remember many of the dates and faces and conversations associated with his activities that are linked to the Peters case. At the end of his testimony as a prosecution witness, defense attorney Daniel Hartman caused a stir in the courtroom when he shoved a paper at Wood in an attempt to subpoena him as a defense witness. Wood left the courtroom without taking it. The exchange came after the jury had been dismissed from the courtroom. Judge Barrett later ruled that attempted serving of a subpoena was, quote unquote, ineffective because an attorney is not allowed to serve a witness. The trial continued Monday with 2 more days expected for the prosecution's witnesses before the defense presents its case. We'll update you next week. And, we laugh, and I'm laughing at this and the craziness. But the fact of the matter is, if you want nightmare fuel, there are any number of reports out on the various state-level election boards and election workers about, one, the massive turnover from 2020 to 2024, including like Arizona. Like the huge, overwhelming majority of the people who worked in 2020 are not there anymore in 2024, and the large number of diehard MAGA Trump supporters who are getting these positions, and not just kind of the worker bee level, but supervisory positions and on the boards. And it is, important that we have things like these trials, which are hopefully, effective to serve as a deterrent. Just like, January 6th, I think has provided an extraordinarily positive deterrent effect to a bunch of people, deciding the reason we didn't see protests around New York or Fulton County in part is because people don't want to get arrested and go to jail. So these, kind of state level things that took place around 2020 are absolutely necessary to try and send a warning shot that, look, this is against the law. And if you break the law, we're going to prosecute you. And so don't think about it in 2024. And unfortunately, I guarantee you, there are a lot of people out there right now getting ready to throw, election certification shenanigans, into play around the election. And it worries me. And it is really, really concerning.
Yeah, fortunately, we have Mark E. Elias and Democracy Docket on our side. I have some breaking news, Pete. I'd like to get your reaction live. Well, not live.
Nice. But
as it's happening.
I feverishly go to Twitter to look at the what happened.
Don't look. Let me tell you.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so remember George Santos and how he lied and stole campaign money from his family and said he paid back and loaned it to his own campaign, and he did that to get the $250,000 threshold that you need to get national party money to come into your campaign. And that's kind of why he was indicted. And it turns out that it looked like Andy Ogles was doing the same thing. He's a Republican congressman from Tennessee. Well, from News Channel 5, Nashville, FBI agents have executed a search warrant on Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles.
Boom.
As the first-term Republican faces continuing scrutiny over fraudulent campaign financial reports that he filed.
They can't be right. The Republicans of the Party of Law and Order, they wouldn't do that, Allison. There's no way. There's no way they would break the law. Look, if you're at the point, one, like there are for those folks who aren't law enforcement or attorneys out there in our listening audience, to get a search warrant, you've got to go in front of a judge and say, look, here, and swear out an affidavit under penalty of perjury that there are these various facts that rise to the level of probable cause to believe that there are fruits of a crime or evidence of a crime in a place to be searched. And everybody, to get a search warrant on anyone, you have to do that. To do that on a member of Congress, there are within the Department of Justice, there are far higher sign-offs that are required. It goes up the chain. It faces a far greater level of scrutiny, a much higher level of approval before that agent and prosecutor can even set foot in front of the judge to try and do it. So suffice it to say, if you got a U.S. congressman who's getting his house searched, it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
The story says, back in May, Ogles filed a series of amended campaign financial reports admitting he had not personally loaned his campaign $320,000 as he had reported back in 2022. Other amendments to his campaign financial reports resulted in Ogles retracting claims regarding thousands of dollars in campaign contributions and expenditures that he had previously reported to the FEC. That development came several months after News Channel 5, good old Phil Williams, raised questions about whether Ogles had the financial resources to make that personal loan. Despite having reported making the $320,000 loan, Ogles' personal financial disclosures didn't show any substantial investments, not even a savings account. And a watchdog group, the Campaign Legal Center, later filed a complaint with the Office of Congressional Ethics, comparing Ogle's conduct to disgraced New York Congressman George Santos. I told you this was coming. I was like, dude, Ogles did the same bullshit FEC filings, lied about lending himself a bunch of money so that it can look like he's met the threshold to get National Party money. And that is against the law. So
yeah, funny how it all catches up. And, the interesting thing is going to be there's that traditional 90-day cooling off period ahead of the election where DOJ doesn't take overt investigative steps that would and usually it's in the presidential election, but it also applies to congressional things. So we're coming up on September, October, November, we're at that 90-day mark. So, anticipate.
I heard it was 60.
Is it 60? You might be right. You might be right.
It's also an
so we have until
rule.
September. I think, yeah, you're right. But wrong.
If I'm the DOJ, I'm also like, it's just Andy Ogles.
Does not matter. I'm looking up where Maury County is from my, see if I can find Maury County.
So yeah, I think that's September, first week of September. So if they're going to indict him, it would have to be before then or after the election. But he was raided last week, at the end of last week.
Nice.
I'm sorry, not raided. A lawful search warrant was executed. But anyway.
Yeah, looks like it's about 10 miles south of Nashville. 10 miles south of Nashville or so.
Womp womp. Anyway, good news all around. Law and Order party. Always on the receiving end of that Law and Order. Anyway, any last final thoughts before we get out of here for the week, my friend?
No, it's interesting that, the party that claims to be one thing that's actually another. I don't know who started it. I heard Claire McCaskill say it, I think on Morning Joe, but I had seen it from someone else beforehand. And they said, Tim Walz is who JD Vance pretends to be. Yes. And I thought, that's exactly it. And again, it's all a bunch of posers and nothing better than getting a guy, who can walk the walk. And
it reminds me of Senator Kennedy, right? Who 10 years ago didn't have an accent, but now he's all Q. I'm Roscoe Pico Kennedy. And it's just it's just an act. I remember one of my favorite comedians, Greg Giraldo, rest in peace, talked about George Bush that way. He's he was a cheerleader. He went to Andover Prep. He was a cheerleader at Yale. I'm a cowboy. No, you're not. But I mean, with the current Republican Party, George Bush was now I'm looking at those videos, those people sending the videos around to him dodging the shoes that were thrown at him, and I'm like, that's a pretty badass guy.
Well, compared to Trump, that is in fact, yes, everybody, yes.
Don't get me wrong. He was.
So here's the question: Would you
horrible.
rather have the poser Kennedy, or would you rather have the I got a bear steak in the back of my car Kennedy, the crazy Kennedy?
Did you see the meme of the worm in his head popping out, smoking a cigarette, saying, "Put the bear in Central Park"?
What? And he said he's got a photo. He took a photo and his flies unzipped. It's what the fuck is going? I'm sorry, we're swearing too much. What is going on? What are you doing?
Roseanne is looking at you what the fuck, dude?
What are you doing? What are you thinking?
Oh man. He's and I think it was funny. He wanted to get ahead of the New Yorker story. Everyone's it's worse.
All the memes are no, I'm telling you. So I say to him, Hannibal, fava beans go great. You won't believe. And all these yeah.
Goodness.
Well, the only downside is I think this will cause him to drop out. And I do think he was pulling more votes from Trump than he was from Biden. But
Trump is going to push him to drop out because he is. But Trump does worse against Harris when Kennedy's in the race. So. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for putting up with a little extra swearing in this week's public episode. You get a lot more of it on the weekend bonus for patrons. And thanks again to all of our patrons who make this possible. Again, you can sign up patreon.com/aisle45pod. And we'll see you next week. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Struck.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.